Yo, what's up? Today I'm going to show you how you can spice up a boring bass line using Rhythmic LFOs so you can take your bass line from this to something more maybe like this. And it's surprisingly simple. You can do this with VSTs, modular stuff like what we got here, as well as most synthesizers. I'll be using my mini modular system for the first half of this to show you kind of the wild side of things. And then I'll show you on a simpler synthesizer, since I know that this module, specifically the Maestro, might not be at everyone's disposal. All right, so let's dive in and kind of reel it back real quick. Okay, so first off, I'm gonna go ahead and mute everything except the kick and our bass line. The bass line's coming from Osiris, and we have the filter turned all the way up. I'm gonna go ahead and remove this so it doesn't confuse us at all. Now, of course, we have our filter, and what we're working with is a single note. Now, I used to do this a ton to really help me bridge the gap between having a sample chopped up that I liked and trying to figure out a bass line that I liked. It was always difficult for me to know what keys and what notes went with what. So what I would do is find the one note that worked, play something rhythmic out of it, but then I would end up with something like this, which is like a little boring, right? So then I realized, oh, we can use Rhythmic LFOs. Now, the Maestro here, one of my favorite modules, no, this ain't sponsored, has 6 LFOs, but specifically, we're gonna focus on LFO 1. Now, on LFO 1, we have different time divisions of whatever the tempo is, and this is the most important thing when it comes to Rhythmic LFOs that are gonna be creating interesting bass lines, because immediately, we can say go at a down ramp at 1/8 of the tempo on 1. Really fast, but we can do the slow version of that. Now, you'll notice something interesting. There's a note in there that is being played, and halfway through it being played, the LFO opens up. So if we were to do something like this and make our gate length a lot longer, and then put another one maybe here and a little shorter, and we'll duplicate that again. Watch this. You hear that? And again, without this, listen to that. Another important thing here is our filter has a pretty high resonance. That's gonna give us that whipping sound, because if we had less of the resonance in here, it still adds a little bit, but it's a little more dramatic with resonance. Of course, this is all to taste. You go crazy. Now, the other thing is, this LFO is moving our filter cutoff for us. It's going into our FM input right here. FM stands for frequency modulation. We are modulating the frequency of the filter cutoff. And then changing how much our frequency modulation moves the filter cutoff will change how dramatic and rhythmic and just noticeable this modulation is, especially if we say, all right, go as far up as the LFO is going up in voltage, in modulation amount, and then leave our filter really low. Now it sounds like it's almost turning the voice on and off. But you can hear there's still like an underlying rumble. Like, listen to this. This is cool. Now, here's the other thing. This is pretty important, and this might get a little tricky when we jump over to the synthesizer side of things, because what the Maestro is able to do here is receive the tempo information, but be separated from the key being pressed information. I hope that makes sense. So most times, again, I'll explain this when we get to the synthesizer, but usually what ends up happening is there's a key sync as well. When you hit the key, it's gonna restart your LFOs. In this case, the only time the LFOs restart is when I press play. You can see a quick little flash happens on a reset when I push play. And that only happens the first time I press play. And then from then on out, they're gonna be receiving the clock information to stay rhythmic and moving with the tempo. That's another big thing, because all these other notes that are happening not exactly on the one are not resetting our LFOs. We could do something like that, and I'll show you how you can get really creative and really tricky with that when we jump over to the synthesizer thing. Now, to get this even wilder, what I was doing a second ago was, say we have this bass line, but I want this to move up and down, which is our filter cutoff. Luckily for us, on this WMD Carbon, we have a volt per octave input right here. Now, volt per octave is similar to the FM input that we're utilizing for LFO1, except this does not have an attenuator for how much of the LFO's level is going to be moving the filter frequency cutoff. But both LFO1 and now, when I plug it in, LFO3 are going to be moving the same knob, which is the filter frequency cutoff. Right? If I go to 1 and mute it, this is now 3 being moved around. And you're probably wondering what kind of LFO shape is that, right? Well, this is just a quick little thing of the Maestro is that you can chain LFO patterns together to create really weird, interesting shapes. For LFO3, we're gonna go slow at a 30-second, and we're just gonna go in this triangle wave and assign that to 3. So now when I press play, I have attenuation turned on internally, but if I turn that off. So this is kind of key because without this, you would have to use an attenuator to basically lower the volume of the LFO going to its destination. It's called attenuation. You want to attenuate it, make it a little quieter or a little softer, take off its range. But we can stick with half, 50%. Cool, I'm happy with that. Now, take 1 back in. Right, so now these two are playing off of one another, utilizing 2 LFOs to go to the same destination, which is our filter frequency cutoff. This is a simple, easy way to really affect the way your bass lines can be played and heard. Because if we go and put in a new pattern in here, let's see what notes we're playing, just this here. All right, we'll do. Listen to that. How cool is that? I'm gonna go into 1 and 3, mute that, open this up. How many of you have made a bass line like this? I have. And I just wished it was cooler. And you can even use this as like a transitional thing, right? We'll say mute kick. And then bring this in. Maybe a little less. Subtle. Yo. All right, before I get too carried away, let's jump over to the synthesizer. We're gonna use the same idea baseline and show you how to kind of freak out your synth using Rhythmic LFOs. 1 sec. All right, so we're here on an initialized patch, pressing play. Same thing, we'll take those out, so we just have the kick and the bass line. Now, filter cutoff, right? Easy peasy. Lower this down, we have an LFO. On here, you'll see that there's an option called sync. This will change our rate from just being like a free frequency amount of how fast the LFO is moving to something synced to the tempo. So let's choose something like 4 beats. Now, across 4 beats, this here is moving to the tempo. This is where things can get a little tricky because unlike the modular, our synthesizer here, our LFO is just kind of running in the background. Sure, it is synced to the tempo, but there is no way to reset the sync rate outside of a key sync, which we'll get to in a sec. There's no way to reset the LFO's starting point when I press play. Because look, if I press play now, it doesn't change. If I press play now, it doesn't change. It's just running in the background even though it is freely synced. So, interesting conundrum, right? But with that kind of comes a new creative solution or possibly a new creative possibility. Does that make sense? That we weren't really expecting. But let's try and work with it, right? So let's speed this up a little bit. We're gonna go to second. Now if we go to our LFO menu, our phase set is set to free. It's just running in the background. If I set this to 0, look at that. Now it's not even completing the cycle at all because when this is set to 0, that means every time a key is sent, it resets our LFO for us. And that's not exactly what we want to do. We want to reset it with the tempo or the start of the sequence, but there's kind of a weird way to do it, but kind of not. Check this out. When synthesizers say LFO1 or LFO2, or in some marketing bullet points, they might say they have like 16 LFOs. What that really means is that for this, Novation Peak, it's 8 voice polyphony. LFO 1, there are 8 LFOs technically for LFO 1 affecting all the voices. And what I did that was messing me up was in LFO 1, when I went and set the first note to 0 and then I changed this to free, I only synced up voice 8. All the others were still out of sync. So to fix this, do you follow me so far? Does that make sense? I hope I didn't just fly way over your head. When I hit 0 degrees, this is resetting all the voices. But if I was to just go and say, you know what we're gonna do instead is go into mono mode, so it stays locked on voice 7, not poly where it's jumping around. We're just going to mono. It's locked onto voice 5. Now that LFO trick that I wanted to do will work. Watch this. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna set this down to a fourth. And then once the first note plays, I'm gonna turn this back to free. There it is. But again, this all depends on how you move this, because now we need to reset this again. If we go to seconds, free, there it is, right? Because we had to set the voice to mono. Another option, we're gonna go out of poly mode, back into our LFO menu, and here, common. We'll turn that on. Common is going to make all the LFOs across all the voices act as one giant LFO. So now we're going across all these voices here, and I'll do the same thing. 0 degrees for the first, and turn it off. And now it's working. But this allows me to play other notes on top of this, right? And you can hear that the LFO is still kind of synced in the background. That's kind of cool. And again, this gives you that ability to play poly while still having your synced LFOs. You with me? You can kind of reset the phase point of your LFOs with your sequencer. You just have to do it manually, and you have to do it every time, and you can't really play it in, because once you move this, you then have to reset. But you might fall in a cool new rhythm like that, and then let's try those chords again. Hey, it's kind of cool. Now let's set up LFO 2 to kind of sound like a delay. This is really simple. We're gonna go and sync this up, and we're gonna sync it a little faster than what the notes are actually playing. So we're gonna go and set it to about, my knob is scratchy. Let's go and set it to a 16th. Sweet. Now we need to set LFO 2 to our filter cutoff. Easy. Mod, what's the source? LFO 2. What's the destination? Filter frequency. By how much? A little bit. This is just LFO 2 by itself. I've taken LFO 1 out. Right? Pretty cool. Similarly, watch this. We're gonna go and duplicate MIDI 1 to here. Go play MIDI 1 here. And then I'm gonna clear all these notes out. Go to our gate length, set this to 8 steps. Now we can really hear what's happening. Out of 2 notes, all of this is playing. Now we raise up LFO 1. Kind of finesse these two here. A little less resonance. And same thing, you go back in here and you got some more notes you can play. You get the idea. There is just so much you can do with rhythmic LFOs to spice up a boring bass line. Without any of this, is just this. down. Turn LFO 1 up. And LFO 1 is now unsynced again, but we can change that real quick. Watch this. There it is. Just boom, boom. I'm just trying to catch that first step. That's in there. Now we bring in LFO 2. Lower the depth of LFO 1 and raise our filter frequency. Cool. Super down with this. What's our type? I prefer the sharper sounds. And this, with a square wave like that, I go real subtle. Just to give it a little bit of movement, right? It's super obvious with resonance. All right, let's build it up and get out of here. Check this out. Reverb. Delay, effects. You already know where I'm going. We're gonna go here, boom, boom. Delay into the reverb, into the chorus. Nothing I would usually make, but hey, I just made it. So I can't really say that anymore. Give me some side chain. Either way, my friends, yo, this has been a fun one. Thank you so much for sticking through. I appreciate you so much. Hopefully you learned something here today, and until next week, you already know the drill. Share the love. Share the knowledge. Knowledge is power.